love my body now. I'm probably never going to, but I don't hate it with the same venom that I did 2 years ago. We're not used to putting a lot of faith in our bodies. And that requires an enormous amount of just, okay, I'm going to let you do whatever you need to do. And that feels really hard.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Uncovery podcast. My name is Maddie, and quick update, I am feeling a lot better after having COVID. I'm still quite exhausted sometimes in the afternoons, which I think I'm realizing and hearing is quite common. So hopefully I'm out of the woods, but I'm just really looking forward to being able to leave my house again. Today, I have an amazing guest and a really heartfelt conversation with a gal that I follow on social media, and her name is Tam Hamill. She's a 36-year-old living in Kitchener, Ontario, and she loves baking, books, being outside, and body liberation. And a lot of what we talk about has to do with social media presence, especially in the recovery community, and things like the comparison game that we play when we're looking at content online. Specifically, we talk about what it's like to be in a larger body and the discrimination that can come in recovery when we haven't expanded our worldview of who has eating disorders, what they look like, and what body diversity really is in the recovery space. So I am so excited to bring you this conversation. And without further ado, Tam Hamill. So Tam Hamill, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I stumbled upon your content on Instagram through basically I had this, not a Finsta, but definitely an Instagram account that I just used for following recovery accounts. And that's how I found you. And I just immediately found your stuff so positive and so real and so helpful, and also like some of the best memes. Like it was this like all-encompassing wonderful account that I'd found, and so I like kept on following. And now now having you on the podcast, I want to kind of dive into how you approach social media, how recovery has been for you, and sort of maybe to start off, how did you kind of come into that space of having the coolest recovery account I've ever stumbled across?
Well, I always have to have fresh memes because I mean, we need some lightheartedness in all the serious stuff that goes into recovery. It's a lot of hard work. And that's why I like to do memes at the end of the day. We all need like a little reprieve from all the hard work we've been doing. And like, I don't know about you, but I find that it gets harder as the day goes on and you get more tired to like make choices that are goal oriented, and everything just feels more challenging. And it's nice to have like a little giggle and a laugh and some cute animal pictures at the end of the day. But like my recovery has been a very long process. I first, I guess, started trying to look for help when I was like 22. I'm 36 now. And like, I don't want it to sound like it's going to be that hard and long for everybody, but it's challenging to access resources. And it can be even more challenging. Like for me, I'm in a larger body. So I just was always, are you sure you're sick? Are you sure there's something wrong? There's nothing, it can't be that bad. And it made it really hard for me to even recognize that there were things that I needed to change. And the older I got, the more I realized like, I can't keep doing these things anymore. Like I'm gonna cry immediately. Awesome. I feel like since I've been in recovery, like I have so many feelings all of the time. I use like my eating disorder and drugs and alcohol to basically not feel anything for like a good 20 years. And now it's like I have all of the feelings that I suppressed all the time, and everything makes me cry.
I call this, I completely agree with you. And the first time that I was sort of in recovery and increasing my food and gaining weight and stuff was sort of starting to come back online, I used to call it oats and feelings because I had noticed this really strong correlation between eating oats and probably just, like upping carbs and whatever it was, where the energy and like mechanisms come from. And then I would just feel everything and I would cry all the time. And so me and my friend kind of had this thing going back and forth. It's like, I'm having an oats and feelings day.
I love that. But yeah, what was I talking about?
How you kind of came into recovery and a bit about like your journey.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I just like, I don't know, I guess the services that I was able to access when I was in my early 20s were not very helpful for me particularly. I think part of it was I never had like the financial privileges to do anything like an inpatient program. So I was relying on like free outpatient stuff. I got some help through Planned Parenthood, and that was actually probably the most helpful.
Oh,
Stuff.
interesting. Can you talk a little bit about what they offered and what that was? I haven't actually heard of that.
Because like, I don't know, I think when people think of Planned Parenthood, they think very much of just like reproductive stuff. But when I couldn't find a doctor because I wasn't covered under my mom's medical plan anymore. And I just needed just to get like, I think I needed a birth control prescription. And when they were asking me about my health stuff, and I ended up telling them about my eating disorder, and they were like, okay, stop, we got to do something about this. So they set me up with a doctor there and a nutritionist and a therapist. And it was just like the first time anyone had ever like given me hope that I could talk about these things, because my friends were great, but they didn't really like understand what I was going through. And it's really hard to talk about that stuff, especially when you're younger and they have like, no experience with any type of like mental health stuff at all. But they were wonderful. And I think I really liked that team approach because it really makes it hard to lie to people.
Oh, you got to keep that story straight between all of your different professionals. If you are going to lie, you got to be like, what is my story? And your brain's not really working all that well. So like, what if I told my dietitian that I haven't told my therapist? And what if I told my therapist? Like it is so hard to lie when you've got a really good support
system. And I'm just like, I'm not a good liar anyways. So I was just like, fine, I guess I'm just going to be honest with everyone. And eventually I think it was just that I got really uncomfortable with the recovery process. So I just stopped going at one point, which was, I mean, I deeply regret it now, but I was also going through a lot of other things. Like I was drinking too much. I was using a lot of drugs, and I didn't want to stop because I didn't feel like I could. And they were going to make me. And yeah, I just freaked out and left. When I moved here to Kitchener-Waterloo, I got a new doctor, and I had reached out for help because it was just before our wedding and I had fallen into a pretty bad relapse. I'd always been sort of up and down with trying to get better, not doing well, trying to get better, not doing well. And I was really not doing well. And my husband had sort of said, we're not leaving this doctor's appointment without you saying something. And I was going to leave. And he's the one who was like, actually, we have one more thing to talk about. And so, yeah, he kind of forced me to. And then my doctor just referred me to it's a Canadian Mental Health Association program here. And they're wonderful. They're health at every size, intuitive eating oriented. They have intensive outpatient stuff. They're just incredible. And I'm so happy that I found them, because I've never, like, in all the attempts to access help that I've had, no one ever sort of suggested that perhaps I stop dieting. I think a lot of it has to do with like my body size, but everyone was very focused on me stopping my binging and purging behaviors, but no one had ever mentioned that maybe you wouldn't feel the need to binge and purge if you weren't constantly dieting and constantly restricting your food. And they were the first ones that were like, you got to stop this. This is what's driving all those behaviors. And I was sort of like, how have I not put these two things together before? Because I think that's like just our cultural message is everybody should be trying to eat less and move more. And especially when you're in a larger body, it's drilled into you from your family, the people around you, your medical professionals are telling you to do all these things. And so it just seems like what you should be doing. And these are the first people that were like, this is not healthy for you. You have to stop. And they also don't have an end date to their program. So I've been there for 2.5 years. and I can take as many groups as I want. I have my therapist through them. I have a dietitian through them. As long as I continue to regularly make my appointments, there I am allowed to stay as long as I need to be there.
That's incredible. And that's rare in a public program, for example, because a lot of them, they just try to like get you in and out and get you moving through the door as quickly as possible, which then creates this sort of revolving door process. When I was in the UK for a few years, and when I got there, I had kind of just started in the few months leading up to that, like kind of relapsing. And I knew that. And I basically wanted to make everybody at home feel okay about me going over there. So I was like, I will go and I will talk to them in the public program in London, and I will get a therapist, blah, blah, blah. And so I did. And first of all, it took months and months and months. But then when I did, they basically tell you, well, you get 12 sessions with a therapist, and that's it. There's no dietitian, there are no groups, there's nothing else in that public system that was available to me, unless you're, I guess, probably warded, or you're so severe that they have to hospitalize you. But it's really, really difficult to get help. And then you're counting down these sessions with a therapist being like, well, I don't feel better after 10 weeks. That's no time when you've spent a decade with an eating disorder.
Completely. And especially not having when you only have the support of a therapist, like, not that that's not helpful, but that's one piece of a really big puzzle. And yeah, to only be allotted 12 weeks, if I was only given 12 weeks, I would be still sick. It took me a solid year to make any really noticeable changes and improvements. I was trying, but it's what, like, exactly what you said. When you spend so much time in it, these behaviors are so ingrained, it's hard to just magically just change your whole outlook on life and your disposition and your routines and your habits and everything that goes into an eating disorder.
It was tough. It was really tough, because then you find, I think people really struggle as well with then getting help at all, because they can't afford a private therapist, right? That's really, really an expensive way. If you have to build out your team financially, that's a huge, and it's not that it's not a worthy investment. If you have it, it's amazing, but that's really, really hard for most people. So that's amazing that you were able to find something that's really, really worked with you and for the amount of time. I want to kind of step back and understand something that you said about the prejudice or the way that people have approached your recovery when you've wanted help because of the size of your body.
Yeah, I have to say as well, like, I was in a much smaller body than I am now, and I was still facing like very much challenges, and even getting, like, I couldn't even get an actual diagnosis for until I was in my 30s. I knew what was wrong with me, and I couldn't get anyone to actually put the right label on it because of the weight requirements that go along with a lot of these diagnoses. It's very frustrating, because not that there's huge differences between different eating disorders, but when you know that the thing that you're struggling with the most is restricting your food, and someone's just trying to get you to stop purging, there are different ways that you would go about dealing with those things. Yeah. And it was very frustrating. And I remember crying to my best friend. They told me to my face that I didn't meet the weight requirements to get given an anorexia or bulimia diagnosis. And I was like, but that's what's going on. That's what I had. And pure, like, and I remember thinking, okay, if I can just get my weight down another X pounds, then I can actually get the help that I need. And I've always been a bigger person. So at that point, I mean, I'd lost 80, 90 pounds. And I was like, okay, now I have to lose even more so that I can get someone to actually recognize that I need help. I guess it made it seem like they weren't taking me very seriously as well. So it was like, I have to prove how seriously this is hurting me. And that started a whole other fucked up relapse, because I was like, I can't get help unless I get smaller.
And that's the most common. I mean, that's such a common narrative for anybody, but especially if you're not being taken seriously, is this I'm not sick enough, And it's like, if you have to ask the question, or if you don't think you're sick enough, because sick people think that. Healthy people don't think, am I sick enough?
Yeah, exactly. I just remember like leaving that appointment and feeling so disheartened and was like, well, what's the point then in like trying to get better if they don't even think I'm that sick? Like I must be fine then. And it was just, yeah, it was just such a frustrating experience. And it also made me, that was one of the last times that I tried to get help, because I was just like, what's the point? Like there's, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how sick I am because no one cares.
And then what actually changed? Then when did the turning point come?
I think I think because the relapse that I got into pre-wedding was so obvious to everybody else around me that I couldn't really ignore it. And like, as much as I was trying to get better, I felt like I was really white knuckling my way through it. You reach a point where you're like, I know that I can't do this anymore. Like, I am at the end of my rope. I want to start this new life with my husband, and I don't want to start it like this. And especially with getting married, I knew I wanted to have kids, and I knew that I couldn't do it like that. And I knew that I also didn't want to pass down all my weird food stuff to somebody else, because I watched my mom diet. I watched all my aunts, all of my mom's friends, all of them dieted my whole life. That sounds so miserable to me. Even my grandmother in her 80s was refusing cake and not wanting to eat chocolate chip cookies and things like that. And like, that fucking sucks. I don't want to live my life like that. I moved from the Toronto where I grew up. I moved here to Kitchener-Waterloo, and we were getting married and we had a house, and it was just this whole new opportunity to have something different than what I'd had. And I just couldn't imagine spending more time living like that and making him so sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, because then our loved ones have to watch us do that too. And you think about your future, and you think about kids, and you think about the life that you want to create, and you're like, this is not it anymore. And something does shift at some point. And I've only experienced that very recently, this ability to imagine a life outside of it, this ability to imagine a life that I actually fully want to live without caveats, without these pieces of compromise and smaller and less than. And that's been such a game changer.
Yeah, I feel like once you get a little taste of what life could be like, it's really hard to to want to stay sick. Is it really that important to me that I keep my body small, or do I want to go on road trips and have kids and have birthday parties and do family things together? Those are the things that sound important and fun and exciting.
They are. Yeah, that's exactly it. And one of my favorite things about you and the content that you create is this reminder that you can choose that. You can choose these nicer things. And especially when it comes to like food and movement and the relationship with that, how have you found more peace? I don't know if I want to say just like complete peace, right? Because you're also very honest about when you struggle too. But how you've kind of come to that place of peace around movement with your body and with food.
I think with the movement one, that was a really hard piece for me because I've always been an active person. Like I just like, I played baseball, I played roller derby, I biked everywhere, we go hiking. Like it was just part of who I am. But I also knew that I was definitely abusing that. And it was something that I really wanted to be able to have in my life in the future. So I sort of just had to stop like everything for a while. And it was so uncomfortable and I hated it so much.
You just went cold turkey on exercise.
Yeah, I think also when I started really like moving through a meal plan with my dietitian, I at one point realized I was going to have to just at some point just stop it with the food rules and the restricting. And it was winter time, and I decided to sort of just can it with the food stuff, try my hardest to just allow myself to eat what I wanted to eat and eat to satiety. I started getting really bad edema in my legs.
Explain that a little bit in case people don't know what edema is.
Edema is like a water retention. So my legs felt sore and tender and very puffy, and even bending my knees hurt a lot. And I'd heard about it with happening for, I guess, people in smaller bodies during their recovery, but I kind of assumed that because I'm in a larger body, it would be something that I wouldn't really have to deal with. And my body proved me wrong.
As it does, as bodies do. They're like, oh, that's cute that you thought that.
Yeah. And I think when I sort of started eating to satiety, I felt exhausted like I've never felt before. I was so tired. My legs were swollen. I couldn't do anything. All I wanted to do was eat and sleep. And that was basically all I did for like 3 weeks. Like I would wake up and have breakfast and go have a nap, and then wake up and have a snack, and then lunch later, and then go and have a nap, and then wake up and have a snack and have dinner, and then go to bed. And I just could not do anything. I was so tired. And I think all that compulsive movement and all those going to the grocery store to get this exact thing so I can make this exact meal, it was like, it takes so much energy to do that all the time. And I guess I just realized how tired I was. So I sort of just gave into that. And then I was seeing a recovery coach at that time as well, because I just needed that little bit more support. And she was just like, I think you should stop. I think you should stop everything for like 3 or 4 months and just deal with being uncomfortable, because a lot of recovery is dealing with being uncomfortable. So you might as well just do it now. And then shortly after that, COVID started, and it seemed like a really good time to just sit down and stay in my house and just relax and try to rest. And so I did that for, I think, like almost 4 months. And at some point I was like, okay, you know what? I really like going for walks. Maybe I can start doing that again. And I had thrown out my activity tracker. I wasn't doing any like monitoring of my body or my movement. And so I was just sort of like, okay, I'm going to walk until I feel kind of tired, maybe go get like a hot chocolate or something on the way, and then walk back home. And so I tried to make it as enjoyable as I could. So I wanted to find a way that my body could feel better without abusing it with exercise, like I'm used to doing.
Balance, to try and strike that balance. I'm not there. Like I'm white knuckling the exercise piece, and I know that that's coming. Like I know that tip where I need to be like, this is not how you want to exist, is to have to do this and to find joy. And even the idea that there can be just like pure joy in exercise or in movement without a fixation on tracking calorie burning, blah, 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 having it modify the way that you physically look, like that is arguably a larger piece for me than even shifting the food piece, and always has been.
I think for a lot of people, honestly, that compulsive movement part is as equally big as the food stuff. And it's not talked about as much, which I find is a real shame, because our culture idolizes healthy movement and being active. And yes, in theory, those things are great, but people like us have a tendency to take those things too far. And it's seen as something that's praiseworthy instead of something that's really detrimental to your health.
Right. Like, right.
Yeah.
And this idea that you must move, because who would you be if you weren't a person that exercised? Who are you if you don't have that as part of your identity? So letting go of that piece, I think, is really difficult as well.
Yeah. And like, I know that this is so cliche, but yoga was so helpful. I'd say 10 years or so, I've really enjoyed yoga. And that was something that was really hard to not do, because it's one of the few exercises that I was doing where I felt embodied, I guess. Mm-hmm. Like I was aware of my body and the way that it felt while I was doing things. Like, okay, my legs feel nice. I feel strong and supported. My breathing feels good. And like, it was just a totally different experience. So I knew that that was something that I really wanted to be able to do again, because it was something that I hadn't been as obsessive about, I guess.
Yeah. Totally. And yoga is interesting. Yoga is a really interesting one for me, like, cause I'm also a yoga teacher, and I've always loved, like, for the last, 10, 11 years, but the way that I came into yoga was hot yoga, compulsive, do it every day, right. And so like anything, like you can abuse anything if your eating disorder tells you to. And so the relationship to yoga has always been a really complex one. And that is what you describe is the goal, is to be like, I know genuinely there is a way to do movement that is nourishing and feels great and is embodied and isn't about all of that other nonsense. But like anything, there's the dark side of yoga and there's the really beautiful side of yoga. And part of that, I think, is how people approach it with inclusion and things like that. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually just found a wonderful yoga studio here in Kitchener. It's called The Branches, and they have such an inclusive approach to everything about their studio. They have an anti-racist book club. They have body positive yoga classes. Like they have everything that I'm looking for. And I also think that COVID was sort of a bit of a blessing for me in disguise, because I was at home a lot by myself with my brain, having to think about all the things that I don't like to think about very often, that I've used my eating disorder to numb myself to. And once I did start exercising again, like gyms are all closed and stuff. So I was at home figuring out how to move my body in ways that I wanted to. And I think not being in a gym environment was so helpful for that, and not feeling like other people were watching me or judging me, and I could just figure out what I wanted to do all by myself. And I've been trying to go back to the gym here and there because my husband owns a rock climbing gym, and I want to go and be there and be present and meet all these people. But I feel really uncomfortable in that kind of setting still, because I still feel like there's this sort of competitive nature in a gym that I'm not ready for that. I don't want to be a part of that. And when I'm at home, I can listen to my music as loud as I want to. I can take my shirt off. I can dance in between sets, and that feels fun. But like going to the gym and being like pumping out sets, and like knowing that there's these gym bros behind me that are like, doing weird gym bro stuff and like, hey, can I give you some pointers on your phone? No, you can't. Go away.
No, thank you. No, thank you, sir. No, thank you, sir.
So I just realized that, you know what, maybe I won't ever be ready for that. And that's fine. I like working out at home. I don't have to go super hard or super long. I can do 5 minutes if that's what I feel like. I can dance the whole time if that's what I feel like. But that's what feels fun and good for me.
Yeah, totally. And the fact that you've been able to find either resources or accounts that have helped to continue that energy for you, there's so much positive to be found online in recovery accounts and things like that. But like anything else, there's a lot of bad. And I would almost argue that it is more so, or it has historically been a much more problematic space for like the online kind of recovery resource, especially on social media. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because you've been such a light in that space.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful for the online recovery community because it has helped me so much. But I also think that's because I've been incredibly selective about who I follow. When I first started my recovery account, well, actually, it started as a weight loss account, which is so embarrassing. And then when I started treatment, I was like, okay, I'm going to unfollow everybody and just start following recovery accounts. And eventually I started to realize that a lot of these people are still really ill, and maybe listening to their advice is not the best idea. People that eat the same things every day, that was starting to feel a little weird, because I was like, that's a behavior that I used when I was in my eating disorder because I was afraid to eat anything else. And people that have their weights in their bios and
number of hospitalizations, like, ugh.
Like, honestly, if you tell me you're sick, I believe you. I don't need you to prove it to me. It's such a, I don't know. And I get that that can be part of being sick and wanting to be recognized as being ill so that you can get the help that you need. But I started at some point having to be a lot more selective about who I was following, because like being in a larger body in recovery, I was comparing myself all the time to people that were recovering into these very small bodies. And it was like, well, if I just do exactly what they're doing, then I'll have the same type of recovery. And that's not how bodies work or how recovery works. It's just not realistic or practical or helpful or anything. But yeah, I remember someone said to me at one point, like 68% of people in North America are in plus size bodies. So maybe the people that you follow online should reflect that. And I thought, wow, that makes so much sense. Like, I can't believe I've never thought of this before. So I really started to look for more people with more diverse bodies. And that helped a lot, because when you're only seeing one type of body, you think that that's what you're supposed to look like. Body diversity exists. And for a lot of people who have been restricting their food and their movement and stuff for a long time, you might not know what your body is going to look like as an adult. I mean, for a lot of us, we started when we were in puberty because we freaked out when our bodies started changing. So you don't know what you're going to look like as an adult. And if you only see one type of body all the time, and then your body doesn't look like that, you're going to think you did something wrong. And that's not. This is just your genetic makeup. Like, you can't do anything to change. Well, I mean, you can't do anything to change it and be a healthy person.
And be a healthy person. Yeah. It's like, it's the body that your body wants to be, the size that your body wants to be. And the earlier you kind of start messing with that, the more foreign it feels to then eventually move into the like I call it like a Maddie sized body. Like, I need to be a Maddie sized body. And I don't know what that looks like, because as you describe, I was really only moving into what a woman's body would eventually become when I started fucking around with it. And so that increases the terror, because you don't even have something to aspire to be like, oh, well, when I was well or whatever. And that's sort of this idea, but comparing uncovery to recovery, it's like, I'm not trying to recover anything that was back there. I never fully was. So I get to uncover and create that, but that's really difficult.
Totally. Also, we're not used to putting a lot of faith in our bodies. And that requires an enormous amount of just, okay, I'm going to let you do whatever you need to do. And that feels really hard. I mean, for me, like, I'm someone who loves control. I want to know the outcome of everything. And when I don't, it makes me fucking panic. And like, just the idea of just giving up that control and letting my body do what it needed to was terrifying. But it helped a lot to see other people go through it and be okay, especially being okay in a bigger body, because you don't know what your body's going to do. The more that I started to see other types of bodies, the more that I realized that other types of bodies exist. Like, my therapist would say to me, like, go sit in a coffee shop and look around at people. And I was like, well, everyone's thin. And she's like, are they? I don't think they are.
You're just looking at the thin ones. You're just looking at them. It's confirmation by yes, absolutely.
My eye was drawn to specific people, and I wasn't really taking in the whole breadth of the diversity of the people that exist around me. And I mean, like, it might be different if you go to a gym. It might be different if you go to a ballet class or something. But when you sit down and you look at like a cross section of the people in your neighborhood, there's going to be a lot of different types of bodies, for example. And I found that, like, I mean, I don't love my body now. I'm probably never going to, but I don't hate it with the same venom that I did 2 years ago.
And maybe acceptance is, maybe that's what we can really more realistically just care less about it. I don't need to love it. I definitely don't need to hate it. If I end up loving it, fantastic, great, magic. But if it just like means nothing, that's great. That's fine.
Totally. I very much subscribe more to like a body liberation, body respect type of ideology. I don't need to love my body. If I did one day, like you said, that would be fantastic. But I don't need to love my body to respect it. Like, and I mean, I spent my whole life being kind of an asshole to it. So I kind of owe it this. And it's a lot easier to just stop trying so hard to love it. When I think about my friends, I'm not like, oh, wow, she's so hot, that's why I like her. I think about how funny they are and how compassionate they are and how giving they are and how fun to be around they are. Like, I'm not thinking about the way that their body looks makes them a good person. So why would I put that same thing onto myself? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And then exposing yourself really consciously to content that is also curated to that kind of message and to that kind of diversity and to the things that actually matter. Now, you did mention, A, the things that our body does for us, and B, that bodies change, based on life stage and things like that. And you recently did announce that you are expecting another little human on this planet coming soon. And there is such a complex relationship between pregnancy, motherhood, food, our bodies, exercise, movement, all of that. And so I'm wondering now, being in recovery, how this pregnancy has felt and how you're kind of dealing with that.
Yeah, it's very exciting, first of all, because I honestly am probably going to cry again. I never thought that I would really be well enough to do this. I never thought that I would be sober enough. I never thought that I would be able to, like, especially the purging was out of control for a while. I just never thought I would be able to stop. And I knew that I wouldn't be able to get pregnant if I was doing those things. But my husband asked me the other day, he's like, "Do you think you're recovered?" And I was like, I tried to answer him the best I could. And I don't think that I am yet. And maybe I might not ever be all the way there, but I know that I don't act on those behaviors anymore. And I know that every day I'm trying as hard as I can to get better. And I think pregnancy has been kind of weird because I felt really, really sick the first 10, 11 weeks. And so if my stomach got too empty, I felt so nauseous. Like I've never felt like, I mean, I used to get like nauseous when my stomach got too empty, but it was an ignorable nausea. And this was not ignorable at all. One was exhausted, so I had to go back to moving almost not at all. And two was all of a sudden I was so hungry all of the time, and I just had to do something about it or I was going to be sick. And like, because I have a purging history, I'm now very, very adverse to throwing up. Like I will do almost anything that I can to avoid it. So I just had to start snacking all of the time. I have crackers in my backpack. I have fruit to go strips in my coat pockets. I just can't go anywhere without having those things on hand because I can't stand that nausea. And I've also had quite a number of food aversions, which has been tricky to deal with because a lot of smells have made me feel yucky. So that's been also, I guess I'm just not used to thinking that much about my food. And now I've had to put quite a lot of thought into it. And I'm so glad that we waited, like I'm about 2.5 years into my recovery because I don't think I would have been able to handle this even a year ago. Like I have to think about what I'm doing a lot more, which is challenging, but also getting easier the more I do it.
And such a testament to the work that you've done in recovery. And I have just like seen the way that you approach recovery and the way that you approach food and movement and all of this. And you just have so much wisdom to share. And it's been absolutely incredible to have you. I always ask these last two questions to my guests that have eating disorder experience. And I think it's, in hopes of helping others help others. And so what was the most unhelpful thing that anyone ever kind of said or did in the process of your eating disorder and recovery?
The most unhelpful thing was probably "you don't look sick," and that one hurt a lot.
Yeah, very invalidating. And then I always follow up with, what was the most helpful thing that anybody said to you in support when you were going through recovery?
There's one quote that I absolutely love, and I have it all over my house, and it's, "You can't change the world on an empty stomach." And it means so much to me. I don't think I realized how much of the things that I'm passionate about that I gave up for my eating disorder. And now that I'm not engaging in those things, I can actually do things that matter to me. And it feels so rewarding. I'm sorry, I keep.
No, we're here for it. And I will tell you that you are changing the world. You're changing it. So that quote is entirely accurate as far as I can tell. It's been so wonderful to have you, Tam.
Thank you so much for having me, Maddie. This was such a wonderful experience. I really appreciate it.
I'm so glad. Okay,
Thanks for letting me cry a bunch. much.
I'm sorry. Oats and feelings. I can't.
Oats and feelings. I'm so stealing that. I love it.
Do it. Okay. Well, thanks again, and we will talk to you soon.